everyone! Welcome to another episode of Classy with the Classics. Today I have a rather large glass of Cabernet because I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens and Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and I really didn't like either one of them. So let's jump into it. First, let's talk about Great Expectations. I thought it was really long and boring, and it was a first-person narrative, but the reader doesn't get to know the narrator very well, Pip, whatever his name is. And maybe my brain is just fried because I don't read classic literature much, but I felt like the language was just super clunky, difficult to understand, and overall did not make it enjoyable. And what's the point of it being a classic piece of literature if it's not relevant or readable or relatable? So, that being said, I am once again on SparkNotes, what helped me get through all my English classes in high school, and let's start by going over the plot overview so that we can figure out what happened in this book, because I don't know. Okay. Pip, a young orphan living with his sister and her husband in the marshes of Kent, sits in a cemetery one evening looking at his parents' tombstones. Suddenly, an escaped convict sprints up from behind the tombstone, grabs Pip, orders him to bring him food and a file for his leg irons. Pip obeys, but the fearsome convict is soon captured anyway. The convict protects Pip by claiming to have stolen the items himself. Okay, I do remember that sequence. It seemed like a very odd place to start the book. I don't know, the whole book was just weird to me, and it seemed like the events weren't really connected, like it didn't flow from one thing to another. It was just kind of like, here are a bunch of random things that happened during this person's life. Okay, so one day Pip is taken by his uncle Pumblechook, which also, what are these names? To play at Satis House, the home of the wealthy dowager Miss Havisham, who is extremely eccentric. During his visit, he meets a beautiful young girl named Estella, who treats him coldly, but he falls in love with her. Miss Havisham decides to help him become a common laborer in his family's business. That's what and then I was confused about this part because I don't know what else Pip would have done with his life besides going into the business that his brother-in-law did, I guess. I don't know. It seemed weird that there was this random outside person who had a hand in that. With Miss Havisham's guidance, Pip is apprenticed to his brother-in-law Joe, who is a village blacksmith. He's unhappy. He struggles to better his education with the help of plain, kind Biddy. Biddy deserves better, okay? That's my only take from this book, honestly. And encountering Joe's malicious day laborer, Orlick. One night after an altercation with Orlick, his sister is viciously attacked and becomes a mute invalid. Oh, and Pip suspects that Orlick was responsible for the attack. Totally missed that part. One day, a lawyer named Jaggers appears with strange news. A secret benefactor has given Pip a large fortune, and Pip must come to London immediately. So okay, I kind of missed that part. I understood that there was some guy named Jaggers and that Pip had to go to London, missed him inheriting a large fortune. How random is that? In London, Pip befriends Herbert Pocket and Jaggers' law clerk, Wemmick. He's disdainful of his old friends. Pip turns 21 and begins to receive income from his fortune. He will secretly help Herbert buy his way into the business he has chosen for himself. They run up debts. Orlick reappears. Pip's sister dies. Pip goes home for the funeral. Several years go by. Oh, and then the convict from the beginning, Magwitch, reappears and tells Pip that he is the source of Pip's fortune because he was so moved by Pip's boyhood kindness, and he has made a fortune in Australia. Pip is appalled, but he feels morally bound to help Magwitch escape London as the convict is pursued both by the police and by Poppy's son, his former partner in crime. There are so many characters that are so forgettable to me. Their names are just weird. And like, that's the biggest thing about the characters. They just have weird names. Oh, Compeyson is the man who had abandoned Miss Havisham at the altar. And Estella is Magwitch's daughter. Miss Havisham has raised her to break men's hearts for revenge. Pip was merely a boy for the young Estella to practice on. Pip begins to care for Magwitch deeply. Before his escape attempt, Estella marries an upper-class lout. Pip goes to visit Miss Havisham, who asks him for forgiveness for how she has treated him. She becomes an invalid. She bends over the fireplace. Her clothing catches on fire, and she goes up in flames. She will continue to, and she keeps pleading for forgiveness. Okay, so Pip and his friends are getting Magwitch out of London. He encounters Orlick. Herbert saves Pip from Orlick. They are discovered by the police because Compeyson tipped them off. Magwitch and Compeyson fight. Compeyson is drowned. Magwitch is sentenced to death. Pip loses all his money. Magwitch feels that his sentence is God's forgiveness and dies at peace. Pip rushes home. He tries to marry Biddy, but Biddy has already married Joe, which doesn't make sense to me because I thought, so Joe is Pip's brother-in-law. Joe was married to Pip's sister, and Pip's sister was so much older than him that she like raised him. And so if Biddy is Pip's age, it's a big age difference. Pip decides to go abroad with Herbert to work in the mercantile trade. Returning many years later, he encounters Estella. Her husband treated her badly, but he's dead. And then Pip and Estella talk and leave the garden hand in hand, Pip believing they will never part again. So that's that, I guess. Yeah, really long and boring. Now that I've read the plot summary, because, I mean, the book is so, I mean, it's pretty thick, you know? So I feel like, I don't know, there had to have, I guess literature was obviously different when that book was published, but I feel like there was a more exciting way to write that story instead of being so long-winded. Okay, let's go over the Spark Notes full book quiz and see what I have retained, which is perhaps obviously not much. What is the name of Miss Havisham's manor? It's Status House, because we just went over that. Yes. In what region of England are the marshes of the novel found? Kent, right? That was also in the summary. Cool. How old is Pip when Magwitch returns to his life? When Magwitch returns, 23? Yes. These are multiple choice questions, but I'm not going to read off all the options unless I'm trying to guess, if that makes sense. Okay. In what publication was Great Expectations originally serialized? Home and Away, Simple Wisdom, The English Almanac, All the Year Round. I have no idea. This was not covered in the summary. I'm going to guess Simple Wisdom. No, All the Year Round. To what genre of fiction, defined by its depiction of characters' growth from childhood to adulthood, does Great Expectations belong? Bildungsroman, Künstlerspiegel, mannerism, or Victorian paternalism? I want to guess the German word because that just, yeah. No, Bildungsroman. Who is Pip's tutor in London? Herbert Pocket? No, Matthew Pocket. Who is Estella's father? Magwitch. What action does Jaggers perform obsessively? He straightens his necktie, he adjusts his hair, he signs his name, he washes his hands. I think it's he washes his hands. Yes. Okay. What is Pip's reaction to Joe's visit to him in London? Embarrassment, anger, joy, resignation. I feel like it's either he's embarrassed or he's joyous. I'm gonna guess embarrassed? Yes. Who takes credit for Pip's rise in social status? Pumblechook? Yes. Who is responsible for the attack on Mrs. Joe? Orlick? Yes. For most of the novel, whom does Pip suspect of being his secret benefactor? Miss Havisham. Yes. What name does Winmick call his elderly father? I don't know who Winmick is. Aged parent, decrepit sire, venerable ancestor, or old feller? I feel like this is going to be 100% wrong, but I'm going to guess decrepit sire just because I like it. Aged parent. These are the new gender neutral parent names. Aged parent, decrepit sire, venerable ancestor, old feller. These are the only parent names I want. Who tells Pip that Compeyson was Miss Havisham's fiance? Magwitch? No, Herbert. What is Herbert's name for Pip? Hayden, Mendelssohn, Handel, or Salieri? I'm going to guess Salieri because it's weird. No, it's Handel. Why? Where does Pip first encounter Magwitch? The churchyard. Because, yeah, he's a convict. Who is the pale young gentleman? I have no idea. Wemmick. No, Herbert. Whom does Estella marry? Drummel? Yes. Who buys Herbert's way into business? Pip, Drummel, Miss Havisham, Estella. Miss Havisham? No, Pip. Oh, Herbert's way. I'm an idiot. What happens to Compeyson at the end of the novel? He escapes with the Havisham fortune. He is killed by Orlick. He is shot by the police. He disappears and is assumed drowned. He disappears? Yes. Where does Estella live when she goes abroad? I didn't know Estella went abroad. France, Germany, Spain, Boston. Boston. No, France. Okay. What was the name of Miss Havisham's brother, Compeyson's first partner? Magwitch, Arthur, Tumbler, or John? Arthur. I'm totally just guessing. I have no idea. Oh, I was right. What accident befalls Miss Havisham before her death? She is thrown from a horse. She's burned in a fire. What is the source of the Why are there so many questions? Oh my God. What is the source of the Havisham fortune? Lumberyards, a brewery, a cotton mill, a noble estate. I'm going to guess a brewery. Ha! I'm right. What name does Magwitch use to hide his identity? Provis, Clovis, Quo Vadis, Uncle Caveat. I'm going to guess Clovis. I like it. No, Provis. 15 out of 25 right. Is that a passing grade? So I got a 60%, which is failing, I think. Bummer. But we're moving on from that. Next, let's talk about Pride and Prejudice. Time for another sip though. Hold on, because I also really didn't like Pride and Prejudice. I am just glad that Pride and Prejudice was at least short. I finished it in one day. I mean, I guess technically 2 days. I read it like the night of one day and the morning of the next. But anyway, like a 24-hour period, I could read Pride and Prejudice. But I had to make myself do it. I didn't realize until I started reading it, like the first couple of chapters were like very familiar to me because I had picked it up so many times before trying to read it because I know it's a classic and I know lots of like, I feel like it's a thing that like young women like, and there's like a movie that everyone likes, which I haven't seen and have no desire to see after reading this book because again, I don't care about the characters. I didn't care about the story. The language is just difficult to muddle through, and I don't care enough to muddle through it, honestly. Like, I don't feel like it does anything for me to struggle to read a book that is so boring and has characters that I don't care about and a story that like doesn't affect me as a person, and there's no big takeaway for it from me. Other than that, I'm really glad I don't live in that time and place because I think I would shoot myself from how boring life is for these people. That being said, let's jump into the plot overview. Okay, the news that a wealthy young gentleman named Charles Bingley has rented the manor of Netherfield Park causes a great stir in the nearby village of Longbourn, especially in the Bennet household, because they have 5 unmarried daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. But I feel like they also go by so many nicknames. Like, it's so hard to keep them straight. Like, Elizabeth is sometimes Lizzie, and she's sometimes Eliza. And it's like, why do you have so many nicknames? Why do they all have to be included? Mrs. Bennet wants to see them all married. They go to visit Mr. Bingley. They attend a ball. He is taken with Jane. His close friend, Mr. Darcy, is less pleased with the evening and haughtily refuses to dance with Elizabeth, which makes everyone view him as arrogant and obnoxious, or prideful and prejudiced. At social functions over subsequent weeks, Mr. Darcy finds himself increasingly attracted to Elizabeth. Mr. Bingley also continues to burgeon. Oh, he's being friends with Jane. Jane is visiting a lot. Jane gets sick walking through the rain to his house and has to stay there for several days. Elizabeth hikes through muddy fields and arrives with a spattered dress, much to the disdain of the snobbish Miss Bingley, Charles Bingley's sister. Miss Bingley's spite only increases when she notices that Darcy, whom she is pursuing, pays quite a bit of attention to Elizabeth. Oh my god. Like, a plot device is that someone got sick because they walked through the rain. I hate this. When Elizabeth and Jane return home, they find Mr. Collins visiting the household. Mr. Collins is a large, young clergyman who stands to inherit Mr. Bennet's property, which has been entailed, meaning that it can only be passed down to male heirs. Mr. Collins is a pompous fool, though he is quite enthralled by the Bennet girls. Shortly after his arrival, he makes a proposal to Elizabeth. She turns him down, wounding his pride. Meanwhile, the Bennet girls have become friendly with militia officers stationed in a nearby town. Among them is Wickham, a handsome young soldier who is friendly towards Elizabeth and tells her how Darcy cruelly cheated him out of an inheritance. I totally did not know this Mr. Collins thing happened. Oops. At the beginning of winter, the Bingleys and Darcy leave Netherfield and return to London, much to Jane's dismay. Mr. Collins has become engaged to Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's best friend and the poor daughter of a local knight. Charlotte explains to Elizabeth that she is getting older and needs a match for financial reasons. Charlotte and Mr. Collins get married, and Elizabeth promises to visit them in their new home. As winter progresses, Jane visits the city to see friends, hoping that she might also see Mr. Bingley. However, Miss Bingley visits her and behaves rudely, while Mr. Bingley fails to visit her at all. The marriage prospects for the Bennet girls appears bleak. I want to kill myself just reading this summary. This book is so miserable for me. That spring, Elizabeth visits Charlotte, who now lives at the home of Mr. Collins' patron, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who is also Darcy's aunt. Darcy calls on Lady Catherine and encounters Elizabeth, whose presence leads him to make a number of visits to the Collins home where she is staying. One day, he makes a shocking proposal of marriage, which Elizabeth quickly refuses. She tells Darcy that she considers him arrogant and unpleasant, then scolds him for steering Bingley away from Jane and disinheriting Wickham. Darcy leaves, but shortly thereafter delivers a letter to her. In the letter, he admits that he urged Bingley to distance himself from Jane, but he claims he only did so because he thought their romance was not serious. As for Wickham, he informs Elizabeth that the younger officer is a liar and that the real cause of their disagreement was Wickham's attempt to elope with his younger sister, Georgiana Darcy. Elizabeth reevaluates how she feels about Darcy. The militia's gonna leave town, so the Bennet girls are distraught because, they have to get married. Lydia gets permission to spend the summer with an old colonel in Brighton, where Wickham's regiment will be stationed. Lydia elopes with Wickham, and the couple, goes missing. Elizabeth hastens home. Mr. Gardiner and Mr. Bennet go off in search of Lydia. I don't know who Mr. Gardiner is. I don't care at this point. Mr. Bennet eventually returns home empty-handed. Mr. Gardiner sends a letter. The couple has been found, and Wickham has agreed to marry Lydia in exchange for an annual income. The Bennets are convinced that Mr. Gardiner has paid off Wickham, but Elizabeth learns that the source of the money and of her family's salvation was none other than Darcy. How scandalous, also. I did think that was, the most exciting thing to me was that this sister, ran away with this man and they weren't married, and then, extorted the family for money, basically. That's kind of funny. Now married, Wickham and Lydia return to Longbourn briefly, where Mr. Bennet treats them coldly. Shocker. They then depart for Wickham's new assignment in the north of England. Bingley returns and starts dating Jane again. Darcy goes with him and visits. Bingley proposes to Jane. Lady Catherine comes to visit. Lady Catherine tells Elizabeth that Darcy plans to marry her. And Lady Catherine wants Elizabeth to refuse, but Elizabeth says that they're not engaged, but she's not going to promise something that won't make her happy. And then Elizabeth and Darcy go out and talk and decide that they like each other and they get married. The end. I mean, I can understand how a long time ago this book was maybe exciting for women to read or for people to read. But again, it kind of makes me want to rip out my eyeballs. Just saying. Okay. Full book quiz. This is another 25 questions like the other one. Let's see if we can do any better. Complete the quotation. It's the opening line. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. Again, I've started this book so many times, I am painfully familiar with the opening lines. The Bennet family lives in the village of Longbourn. Mr. Bingley, when he attends the ball of Meryton, seems to be quite taken with Jane? Yes. How does Mr. Darcy offend Elizabeth at the first ball? He refuses to dance with her. Elizabeth's best friend is named Charlotte. Why does Jane's visit to the Bingleys end up lasting for days? She gets soaked in a rainstorm and becomes ill. What does it mean that Bennet's property is entailed? It can only be inherited by a male. What reason does Wickham give Elizabeth for his dislike of Darcy? Darcy cheated him out of an inheritance. To which Bennet daughter does Mr. Collins propose marriage? I don't know what Mr. Collins is. I'm going to guess Elizabeth? Yes. Whom does Mr. Collins marry? Charlotte? Yes. Why does Miss Bingley dislike Elizabeth? Which one is Miss Bingley? Oh, okay. The sister of... Elizabeth insulted Miss Bingley? No. Miss Bingley dislikes Elizabeth because she is jealous of Darcy's growing attraction to Elizabeth. Interesting. Where do the Bingleys and Darcy go for the winter? London? Yes. In March, Elizabeth goes to visit Wickham and Lydia? No, Charlotte Lucas. Oh, yeah, her best friend. Lady Catherine de Bourgh is Darcy's aunt. When Darcy first proposes to Elizabeth, he spends most of the proposal dwelling on... I don't remember. Her beauty, how socially unsuitable a match she is for him, how much he adores her family, how much money he will lavish on her. I want to guess how socially unsuitable. Yeah, so good. When Darcy proposes for the first time, Elizabeth turns him down. Yes. Elizabeth's feeling towards Darcy begin to change when he sends her a letter. Yes. Darcy's estate is called Pemberley? Haha! I guessed that at random. The other options were Rosings, London, or Brighton. I know it's not London or Brighton because those are cities. I don't know what Rosings is. I just guessed Pemberley. Where does Lydia spend the summer and why? Lydia? Oh, Brighton, to be near the militia regiment. Yes. What socially disastrous romantic decision does Lydia make? She elopes with Wickham. Yes. Who spearheads the search for Lydia after Mr. Bennet returns home in defeat? Mr. Gardiner? Yes. Who pays off Wickham, convincing him to marry Lydia? Darcy? Yeah. When he returns to Netherfield, Mr. Bingley resumes courting Jane? Yes. What does Lady Catherine forbid Elizabeth to do? Marry Darcy. The novel ends with Darcy marrying Elizabeth and Bingley marrying Miss Darcy. Darcy marrying Elizabeth and Wickham marrying Jane. Bingley marrying Jane and Elizabeth marrying Wickham. Bingley marrying Jane and Darcy marrying Elizabeth. I think it's that one. Yes, 23 out of 25. Okay, what grade is that? Oh my god, a 92%. Depending on the grade scale, that's an A, ladies and gentlemen. I'm actually really surprised that No, I'm not actually surprised. I remember more of Pride and Prejudice than Great Expectations because it's shorter. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. I am kind of enjoying filming these videos because it does force me to read classics that I haven't read before. And even if I really don't enjoy them, at least I'm making a conscious effort, which I don't make a lot of for things and reading. Let's be real. I'm a really big mood reader. So this has kind of been a different challenge for me to go back to a kind of school state of mind where I make myself read a book, even if I don't like it. But I'm sure it's good for my work ethic and my brain. So thank you all for watching. I hope it's helped somebody out there who needs to read these books for some ungodly reason. I hope that no one is disappointed in me for not liking or understanding these classic works of English literature. And with that said, bye! See you next time!